Madam President, last week the Senate passed the National Women's History Museum Commission Act, a bill that I authored with the Dean of the Democratic Women Senators, Senator Mikulski of Maryland. It passed finally as part of the National Defense Authorization Act. Our legislation will create a commission to evaluate and plan the establishment of a museum dedicated to women's history right here in our nation's capital. And I know that the presiding officer shares my view that this is long overdue. I am, in fact, pleased to have had all of the women senators as co-sponsors of this bill, and I'm thankful for the support of many of our other colleagues as well. Senator Mikulski has been a terrific co-leader, and I would like to thank her for her leadership. A women's history museum is long overdue in Washington, D.C. Think of it, Madam President. We actually have a museum that is dedicated to buildings, to honoring buildings. We have museums along the mall that commemorate various aspects of our history. We have the Air and Space Museum. There's a privately run spy museum. There's the Newseum, which honors journalism. There is a museum that honors Native Americans. Americans from all over this country can come to Washington and learn about our history and the contributions of the people who have made our nation the greatest country in the world. Despite this plethora of museums, however, there has been no museum dedicated to the women who have helped to shape our nation's history. The legislation that was finally approved last week calls for a commission to fund its own costs, and it would be paid for entirely with private funds at no cost to American taxpayers. This commission would put forth a plan for establishing a museum on women's history so that people who are coming to Washington can learn about the enormous contributions of women to our nation's history. Indeed, American women have made invaluable contributions to our country across such diverse fields as government, business, medicine, law, literature, sports, entertainment, the arts, and the military. A museum dedicated to women's history will help ensure that future generations understand what it is that we owe to the many American women who have helped to build, sustain, and advance our society. Such a museum will share the stories of pioneering women like abolitionist Harriet Tubman, the founder of the Girl Scouts, Juliet Gordon Low, Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, astronaut Sally Ride, and my personal inspiration, Maine Senator Margaret Chase Smith. Madam President, I first introduced legislation to establish a museum for women's history in 2003. Early the following year, the Senate unanimously approved my bill. Unfortunately, that legislation was not taken up by the House and died. In 2005, the Senate again approved the legislation, but it too stalled in the House. With the passage finally of this commission bill, the effort to establish a museum for women's history in our nation's capital takes a positive step forward. This bill will convene a talented, diverse, and skilled panel of historians, educators, museum administrators, and other experts with experience in women's history to make recommendations for the creation and the sustainment of such a museum. It's important to emphasize that this museum will portray all aspects of women's contributions to our history without partisanship or bias. The only political statement that we will be making is to correct the long-standing omission of the role of women in America's history. I would also like to recognize and thank Chairwoman Landrieu and Ranking Member Murkowski for their careful consideration of our bill by the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, which unanimously approved it last month. Madam President, telling the history of the contributions of American women matters, and this bill takes a long overdue first step toward recognizing and honoring those who have shaped our shared American heritage. I look forward to the day when young girls and young boys visiting Washington will be able to visit a women's history museum to learn more about the remarkable contributions of American women to our nation. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.